He doubled the number of beds in the state's charity hospitals. Louisiana was the first state to have charity hospitals. Right up the street here. It might be shut down soon. He raised the state university, LSU, to national stature in size and scholarship. Robert Penn Warren couldn't get a job. LSU was the only university in the country during the Depression that was hiring. It was hiring the best professors everywhere. He bought the best football team. Huey would lead the band down through Tiger Stadium. He'd sit on the sidelines. He'd hire and fire the coach. He had the star football players living in the governor's mansion. But the problem was he fed them so well with steaks and milkshakes, they gained too much weight. The coach tried to get them out of there. He wanted to expand the football stadium, and the legislature wouldn't do it. So he put a bill through for a new dormitory. Well, that dormitory seated 60,000 fans at games. And you can see that dormitory as part of the facade of Tiger Stadium today. He lessened the burden on poor farmers by giving them a homestead exemption, property exemption, which we still have today. He allowed thousands of poor to vote when he abolished the poll tax. This is in the South in the 1930s. After I wrote the book, I found out that, and I got this from Andrew Young. Andrew Young, the former ambassador to the UN, great man. He speaks very highly of Huey Long. And one of the many reasons he does is that Huey Long hired African-American doctors and dentists to go around and give free care to poor blacks. And you don't see this in any of the literature. It's not there. It wasn't politically beneficial to Huey, but it shows that there was some heart there. And Andrew Young's father was a dentist. And they bought an old van for him, the state did, and he drove that van around Louisiana giving free dental care to the African-American population. Could Huey Long have been president in the 1930s? He had presidential ambitions. He is the most ambitious person I've ever studied. Ambition made him tick and more. In 1936, he did not plan to run against Roosevelt. What he planned to do was to get another candidate that he would back in a third party. He would not cut his own throat with a third party. He would use someone else. By splitting the party, he would allow the Republicans to win in 1936. He was a Democrat, but his strategy was to allow the Republicans to win in 1936, probably Hoover back again. And then after 4 years of economic chaos that he predicted, the time would be right for Huey to capture the Democratic nomination in 1940 and the presidency. Now, I find this probably one of the most damning characteristics of Huey, that he would sell the country down the tubes for 4 years so that he could become president. How morally corrupt could you be? Now, I've had some real tough arguments with his relatives in the long term. Now, by the way, Huey is still alive, according to that. That he would sell the country down the tubes so he could become president. I cannot get beyond that. No matter what he does, good. That really damns him in my life. If he had become president, foreign affairs would have been a disaster. He couldn't care less about what was happening overseas or in Europe or in Nazi Germany. He had no interest. Again, what was he interested in? Power for Huey Long. Power for Huey Long. Now, in reality, I don't think Huey would have gotten that far. Someone else would have shot him besides him being shot in the Capitol in 1935. There was some serious assassination plots being planned. I was giving a lecture one night up in North Louisiana on Huey, and a fellow came up to me, and really respected sheriff, one of the few really respected sheriffs, and he said, Dr. White, he said, my grandfather was very close to me, and before he died, he sat me down one night. He said, I got to tell you something that's, I've told no one. He said, I was part of what was called the militia, and we had plotted to kill Huey on such and such a night at such and such a corner, and we had the guns distributed. Everyone had their orders, and it would happen if he hadn't been shot before that. And these were respectable people. One refined lady with the white gloves and eating cucumber sandwiches said that her idea was to put a nail on his seat when he came to speak in their town, and it would have poison on it. It would have food poison on it, and he would sit on it, and she said he would die the life of a dog. I mean, everyone in the state was split down the middle. You either were for Huey or you were against him. I interviewed a woman in her mid-80s, great lady, still in great shape. She drove everywhere. She drove to the gym every day. And she was in a sorority at LSU. She was a very good friend of Huey's daughter. She stayed at the mansion often. But her father was the treasurer of the state and a good friend of Huey's. And at one time, Huey told him to build these highways, and there was no money. He said, well, build them anyway. Well, Governor, I'm violating the law if I spend this money. I don't have this money. Huey fired him. And he had to move out of the state because he was an accountant. And every time he would go to a business in Baton Rouge or New Orleans, and they were about to hire him, then they would get a call from Huey's law office saying, you can't hire this guy. So he moved to Atlanta, and as I said, I was interviewing his daughter in her 80s, and I said, where were you when Huey was shot? And she said, I was in the sorority house, and the girls came in, and I said, what'd you think? She said, my only thought was, my father can come home. But I think politically, some things would have happened to Huey also before. If you remember, Al Capone was convicted by the federal government for tax evasion. Well, the same task force that convicted Al Capone moved here to New Orleans, and it was in New Orleans for over a year, interviewing people, interviewing Huey's staff, tracking money. And they had put together a huge case, tax evasion case against Huey. They met on a Saturday in Dallas. Roosevelt had picked the former governor of Texas, Dan Moody, very respected man, to prosecute the investigation. So they met on Saturday, and the next day, Huey was shot. Those files were sealed. They're still sealed, and the Long family, of course, wouldn't let me look at them. But that's another story. But I think Huey's national political career would have probably ended with that case, but his state political career would just been strengthened. It was all personality, it was all force, and he never lessened his grip on Louisiana until the day he died. There's a lot of debate over who shot Huey Long. Most of the literature says a doctor named Carl White shot him. There's a lot of literature that claims that Carl did not. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to decide upon that. I'm a historian who does not like to guess. I wasn't there. But my audiences always ask me to come out with my own personal opinion, and even though it's not in the book, I'll work through that. Huey was shot on a Sunday. He was going to introduce a lot of new legislation. He was going to put most of Carl Weiss's family were school teachers. One was a principal. Another was a judge who had fought against Huey. Huey had legislation to put all of those people out of business. There was also rumors that he was going to announce that the Weiss family had some type of coffee blood. He was going to use the race issue. And Carl Weiss was a young doctor, brilliant doctor, a surgeon, who had a lot of pride. He had a young wife who looked like Elizabeth Taylor, and a brand new baby boy. He was Catholic. He'd taken the Hippocratic Oath. Somehow, Huey and he ran into each other in the Capitol. Allegedly, Weiss pulled a gun, shot Huey. Huey's bodyguards riddled Weiss's body with over 70 slugs when they lifted the body, but all of his clothes fell off. They were so ripped apart, and bullets fell all around. Well, out of his body. You can still see the bullet holes in the marble behind the elevators in the Capitol where he was shot. And Huey died 2 years later. And all of his people claimed that Carl shot Huey. I've seen no evidence that there was any premeditation that Carl Weiss went there to shoot Huey. I think there's evidence that he went there to punch Huey out, and that the bodyguards had, and they were a bunch of nipple drivers anyway, that they just lost their patience and shot him. Huey said to a nurse later, said, "Why did he hit me?" He didn't say, "Why did he shoot me?"